Behind every legendary medieval knight stood a forgotten boy who had survived something that would destroy most adults. These weren't privileged noble boys practicing elegant swordplay in sunny courtyards. They were overworked, often beaten apprentices living a reality so harsh it would break most modern teenagers within a week. Today we're pulling back the curtain on one of history's most misunderstood roles, the Knight Squire. What you're about to discover will completely reshape how you think about medieval life, knighthood, and what it really took to become one of Europe's most feared warriors. Picture this, you're 7 years old, maybe 8, and your parents are packing your belongings. But this isn't a fun sleepover. You're being sent away from home permanently to serve in a stranger's household. Welcome to medieval nobility, where childhood ended the moment you could hold a sword. This was the page system, and it was brutal by design. These weren't summer camps for rich kids, they were boot camps for future warriors. Boys learned the fundamentals: horse riding, basic sword work, reading, writing, and most critically, court etiquette. They had to master the complex social hierarchy of medieval society because one wrong move, one misplaced word, could mean death later in life. By age 14, if they'd survived and proven themselves worthy, pages graduated to squires. The word comes from the French écuyer, meaning shield bearer, and that tells you everything about what came next. These boys were about to become human equipment managers for some of the most dangerous men in medieval Europe. Let's destroy some myths right now. Squires spent maybe 10% of their time actually training for combat. The other 90%, they were glorified servants. A squire's day started before dawn, sleeping on the cold stone floor outside their knight's chamber door. Why? Because they were the first line of defense against assassins. Medieval knights had enemies, and squires were expected to die protecting their masters if necessary. When morning came, they helped dress their knight, and this wasn't like putting on a shirt. Medieval armor was a complex puzzle of interlocking pieces that could weigh 50 pounds or more. One mistake in the assembly could mean their knight's death in battle, which meant their own death shortly after. But armor maintenance was where the real work began. This equipment was incredibly expensive, sometimes worth even more than a house. Squires spent hours every day cleaning, polishing, and checking for rust or damage. Any metal left uncleaned could weaken and fail when it mattered most. They maintained weapons too, sharpening blades and cleaning off blood and soil after training or combat. They cared for horses, which were just as valuable as the armor. A knight's horse could cost as much as a small village. And they served at meals, standing for hours while their masters ate, only getting their own food after everyone else was finished. When squires did get to train, it was designed to be harder than actual combat. Knights understood that if you could handle the training, battle would feel almost easy by comparison. Horsemanship was the foundation of everything. Think about this for a moment. A knight had to control a massive warhorse with just his legs and body weight, while holding a heavy shield in one hand and a 12-foot lance in the other, at full gallop, while aiming at a target the size of a dinner plate. This level of skill took years to develop. They practiced on the quintain, a rotating wooden post with a shield at one end and a heavy sandbag at the other. Hit the shield wrong, and the sandbag would swing around and knock you clean off your horse. Miss entirely, and you'd face punishment from your knight. There was no gentle learning curve in medieval training. For sword work, they attacked the pell, a thick wooden post wrapped in straw. But here's the twist. Their practice weapons were deliberately heavier than real swords. They built muscle memory with equipment that would exhaust them, so when they picked up actual weapons, they felt light and responsive. But training wasn't just about violence. Squires learned music, dance, poetry, and languages. They had to read and write in Latin and French, play chess, and master the art of falconry. Why? Because knights weren't just warriors. They were sophisticated members of high society who needed to navigate complex political relationships. This is where medieval life gets fascinating. The same young men who spent mornings practicing ways to kill people spent afternoons learning to recite romantic poetry. They hunted with nobles, played games with aristocratic ladies, and were expected to display impeccable manners in court. This wasn't contradictory, it was strategic. Medieval warfare was often about politics, and politics required social skills. A knight who could charm a lady might gain access to her father's military support. One who could discuss philosophy with a bishop might secure the church's blessing for a campaign. Squires also supervised the younger pages, which meant they finally got to dish out some of the punishment they'd been receiving for years. You can imagine how much they relished this opportunity for revenge. Here's another Hollywood myth to destroy. Squires weren't mini knights charging into battle for glory. They were support staff whose job was keeping their knight alive and effective. When armies marched, squires rode ahead with the baggage train and spare horses. During battle, they stayed close enough to help, but far enough back to avoid the main fighting. Their job was equipment management under the most stressful conditions imaginable. A knight's primary weapon was his lance, but lances broke, constantly. When that happened, the squire had to rush forward with a replacement while arrows flew overhead and men died screaming around them. They also led spare horses because a dismounted knight was usually a dead knight. Interestingly, there was an unwritten rule that knights shouldn't attack squires. They were considered non-combatants, but some young men couldn't resist joining the fight when the moment came. The moment they drew their sword in anger, they lost that protection and became fair targets. If their knight was wounded, squires faced perhaps the most dangerous job of all, dragging an unconscious man in 50 pounds of armor off an active battlefield while enemy soldiers tried to kill them both. Let's talk about something the romantic versions never mention: the beatings. Physical punishment wasn't occasional, it was routine. Squires were beaten for small mistakes, slow responses, or sometimes just because their knight was having a bad day. This wasn't considered abuse by medieval standards, it was considered education. The theory was that pain taught lessons that words couldn't. A squire who forgot to check his knight's armor for damage might get beaten, but he'd never forget again. And in a world where forgetting could mean death, perhaps the brutality made sense. But the service worked both ways. Knights were expected to actually teach their squires, not just work them to death. They provided training, equipment, and eventually a recommendation for knighthood. It was a harsh apprenticeship, but it was still an apprenticeship. After 7 years of this life, if a squire had survived and proven himself, he could expect knighthood between the ages of 18 and 21. The ceremony was elaborate and deeply religious. A night of prayer and fasting, followed by ritual bathing, dressing in white, and receiving the sacred sword and golden spurs. But not everyone made it. Some squires lacked the physical ability. Others couldn't afford the massive expense of maintaining horses, armor, and equipment as a knight. These men might receive the courtesy title Arma Patrina, essentially a participation trophy for those who tried but couldn't afford the full lifestyle. Some squires performed so heroically in battle that they were knighted early. Others, like Geoffrey Chaucer, chose different paths entirely. He became one of England's greatest poets instead of a warrior. And some simply remained squires their entire lives, serving knights as career assistants. This wasn't considered failure. It was a respected profession for those who preferred steady employment to the dangerous uncertainties of knighthood. The squire system was brutal, unfair, and would be considered child abuse by modern standards, but it worked. It created some of the most skilled warriors in human history, men who could fight effectively in armor that weighed as much as a small person while riding animals that could kill them with one kick. More importantly, it created a sophisticated warrior class that valued culture, education, and social skills alongside pure fighting ability. These weren't mindless killers. They were complex individuals who had survived one of history's most demanding apprenticeships. The next time you see a movie about medieval knights, remember the Squires. Remember the young boys who gave up their childhoods, endured years of hardship, and sometimes died for the chance to join an elite brotherhood that defined medieval Europe. If you've enjoyed this journey into the fascinating world of knights and their squires, please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a future video. And share your thoughts below. Perhaps you have a question about other aspects of medieval life that we could explore in future episodes. Until next time.